Okay, yeah. So tell folks if they arrive afterwards, just click it. I'm gonna have it on the whole time and then drop it because I'm gonna run. Okay. As you can tell, we are in a dead heat here. So I figured the best thing to do was to do both. Is that reasonable? No? Which one do you hate? Yeah, we're gonna start with timeline because that's the obvious winner by a whopping one person. And we'll do the timeline of all history, and then we'll talk about when we left Earth. And we'll kind of like not go into a lot of detail with the rocket, but you got to see rockets take off. That's like the coolest thing ever. If you've never seen that before, you can go to Vandenberg Space Force Base. I mean, you can't go in, but you can go nearby and you can watch them take off. So there is you go to VFB space launches, and they'll tell you like a week in advance when stuff is taking off and where. Okay. Any questions before we get started? So you have one homework left. That will be due on Friday. We talked about it already. There will be no final. There'll be nothing during finals week. Don't come into this classroom unless you are here for another class. Cool. Okay. Okay, so I made this a while ago, so some of it is not perfect, but it's okay. I have tried to make updates as I've re-given this one. It's pretty fun, okay? We're gonna start out pretty lighthearted, and then we're gonna try and place all of the events that we've talked about so far in like the broader context of everything. So in order to do that, we're gonna use a very similar format for the entire set of time periods, and that looks like this, okay? So this is the last 24 hours. Well, I guess it's not exactly right. Because I suppose this should be shifted over. And like a couple more coffees. Okay? And you're here now. And what we're going to try and do is we're going to keep shifting to the right. So for example, I'm going to compress the last 24 hours to the right. This clicks. Come on now. There you go. Right? Got a reasonable technique? Okay. And this allows us to see sort of the relative sizes of time periods compared to each other. So for example, if I compare the last week, there's the last month, and this is what maybe 6 months ago looks like. Nothing special. Boring class so far. Good. Okay. All right. This is the 21st century. Okay. So 21st century, unusually enough, starts in the year 2000, very confusingly, right? So 20 centuries, you'd be like, okay, that's the year 2000. But of course, we start counting from 0. So the first 99 years and the year 0 count as the first century. So this is the 21st century. Some of you were born here. Don't tell me who. Okay, make me feel bad. That is something I think we all experience. I don't think anyone is less than 4. Right? Hopefully. That'd be impressive, but I don't think that's true. I didn't want to include anything after this, but that's the Obama presidency. This is when Osama bin Laden was killed. Okay, that was anyone alive for that? This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna find out how old people are by how many events they were at. Okay. Do people know the Arab Spring? You were like aware of that happening? Kind of? Second grade. Second grade? Okay. All right. Iraq War, the end of the Iraq War. You're both you were born a month before the end?
No.
Oh,
End of it.
that's crazy. Okay, here, yeah, okay. All right, that makes way more sense. All right. And yeah, who sent us there? Our good old drinking buddy Bush. And you may have heard about this thing called the iPhone. That was 2007. Yeah, that's not one. Okay. And then there's this thing called 9/11. Raise your hand if you were alive for 9/11. Okay. All right. Not everyone. Oh yeah, I guess I was. Oops. All right. So this is the average American 37-year-old, 39-year-old's life so far. So that whole 20th century, that's compressed, right? Yellow shows up really good. Super easy to see the yellow, huh? Yeah. Okay. Didn't think about that. There's real world, not the show. College, high school, for maybe an average 39-year-old. Middle school, elementary school. So there are some things that I didn't see, like the Chernobyl disaster, which disaster. Internet became a thing. I was alive, but not like cognizant. It wasn't like on the internet at 4. But I was there for mobile phones. That was strange. It's like, oh yeah, you don't need the landline anymore. I had like the first Razor. Those were sick. Okay. Wasn't there for the Challenger explosion. That is sad. Ties into the next one. Here's a long human life, 99 years. Average life expectancy won't get you there, but you know, almost the average. If you are almost 100 years old, you lived through a number of pretty important events. Watergate, so that was when the president spied on his political opponents and then got caught doing so because he was so paranoid that he took secret recordings of everything he did in the White House, and someone found the recordings where he admitted on tape doing it because he thought that he was above the law. Good thing we're not a president like that anymore. You have here the first person landing on the moon, which happened. Ah! F. Okay, I'll show you evidence of that happening in the later part of today. This guy got murked. And we're going to see him do some really important speech today. We can talk about the implications of why that happened. Wasn't great. Not a good look for America. This is all happening during the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, particularly the civil rights movement associated with people of color. Of course, the suffragettes happened before that, so women fighting for their rights has been an ongoing struggle. Some would say, you know, this is sort of like when we think of this U.S. Civil Rights Movement, but of course, in context of today, you know that there are a lot of people who are still fighting for their rights. So it's really a protracted struggle. And as we talk about something like the Cold War, really that didn't actually ever end. Some people think about the Cold War as having a final date. That was when, for example, the USSR dissolved, but of course we're still adversaries with Russia. So in one way, we're not actively engaged in wars with them. We have what are called proxy wars, where they have people who they fund, and we have people that we fund, so that we can spend money fighting each other in foreign countries. Right, okay. If you were old enough to be 99, you saw baby boomers getting born. Oh. And World War II. TVs were widely used in homes. I used to talk to my great grandmother who lived in LA. She was, like 90 when she died 10 years ago or something. So she would have fit here. And she would tell me how we would be driving down the 5. She'd be like, I used to go down here, but it was all orchards when we were on a horseback. And I was like, what the fuck? Okay, that's crazy. So that's literally in her life. Yeah, she would be on the carriage in the back. And it would take like a week. And I was like, oh, okay, that's wild. Cool. So, and that's not too long ago. I mean, 1925, 100 years ago. Right? We think about time as like ancient, but like you knew these people, or your parents knew these people. Okay. Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic. That was the first plane going across the Atlantic. Charles Lindbergh, and famously, someone stole his baby. Oh. Yeah. We can't get into it, but yeah, look at that. Okay. So, one thing that surprises me, now I have to adjust this, right? That says 99, but this is 90. You can see that it was made 9 years ago. How much closer a 100-year-old birth is to Lincoln's assassination, which is right there, than it is to today? So if you were 100 years old, you're closer to Lincoln's assassination than you are to the current day. And we'll see this is a recurring theme about when we think how old stuff is. Women only recently got the right to vote. So that is 104 years ago. How old is the US? Yeah, because the birthday was July 4th. Yeah, okay, good. First commercial flight. That is not the first flight of Orville, but the first one that we paid people to go on, not across water, but just across land. Titanic sank. There's a film about that. Raise your hand if you think Jack could have fit on the door.
Did you know that the first Titanic film was made a month after it sank?
Seriously?
Yeah, with survivors. Yeah,
With survivors in it?
yeah, at least one, and it gave her like PTSD flashbacks.
Wow.
It's lost to time, but we know it existed from posters.
That's amazing. Okay. Bounty for anyone who can find it. All right. The first cars, 1886. Basketball was invented in 1891. Pretty old game. What's older, basketball or baseball? Baseball. Baseball is America's pastime. What's better, basketball or baseball? Yeah, let's go. All right, everyone knows what the right answer is. Okay, Lincoln also got murked. Famously, presidents get shot. Okay. We can't spend too long here, but I do want to talk about this. If you've ever heard about like blue regions, like places where there's a lot of really old people, and they're like, oh, you got to eat like more fish, or you got to eat like the Mediterranean diet. What have they actually found about these populations? Turns out keeping accurate birth records is hard. Okay, so most people do not live to 116. And we don't think that this person did either. Okay? Living to be really old is hard, and accurate birth records are very new. In some cases, it's deliberate, like you can keep taking pension after the person dies, right? Just like keep collecting retirement. In some cases, it's unintentional. Right? So I'm not going to ascribe any single person that, but many of the follow-up studies have been shown that these sort of high concentration of old people is systematically just like bad birth records or fraud. That's the Civil War. Pretty quick. But the South to give it up real fast. Turns out all you have to do is be better at everything. And if you like studying the Civil War, it is extremely fascinating. It gives you a precursor into understanding the American imperial complex, which is that the way that the Americans won is that they could deliver supplies from point A to point B real effectively. And that's called projection of strength, right? So they would just drive their troops all the way down into the South. They split the South in two. The South could not communicate goods and services or troops. And then you can just conquer and divide, right? And we would continue to do that till the present day, but we do that with forward operating bases. We just put a little concentration of places our planes can get in and out, and then we don't have to occupy the whole region, right? So if you didn't know that the Philippines was a colony of the US, I recommend a book called How to Hide an Empire. Really interesting. American Civil War happened there. That's the 1800s. That's the 1900s. Remember where we are? Oh, that's it. Right, green one. Right, so remember how much this is getting squished. The yellow here is the modern era, right? That's the 21st century. Okay? And there's George Washington's presidency. Interestingly enough, right around the French Revolution. Any similarities the day of the French Revolution? Yeah.
The French government's launching.
Not what I was looking for. No, today. I encourage you to look up the distribution of capital. Who owns what? What percentage of people own what? Today, the fewest number of people own the most amount of stuff at a rate that is only mirrored by the time period right before the French Revolution.
I mean, my next guess was going to be that aristocrats are getting killed in the street.
Yeah, that was the reason. That was the reason. So there's a wonderful Mark Twain quote about the Reign of Terror. If you like Mark Twain, he's problematic in some cases, don't get me wrong. But he reflects on the Reign of Terror, which was occurring during his lifetime, where people were getting upset about killing people in the streets, right? And how violent and bloody it was. And he juxtaposes that with the idea of systemic poverty created by hoarding wealth so that people die slowly in their homes compared to rich people dying in the streets. And how they really are one and the same type of terror, right? Recommend that one if you want to read stuff later. Okay, so there's the European colonization of the Americas. It goes back a long time. US history is not as long as the colonization, right? We were here for a long time, and I'm saying that because I look like this. We were here for a long time, and then we said, no thanks, we don't want to be British anymore, right? Lots of stuff happened. This one is fun just because you kind of get to see the overlap of certain people that we've talked about. So Galileo's right there. Galileo and Shakespeare were contemporaries, but Galileo and Newton were not. Galileo had all of his ideas, saw space, took pictures, and wrote them down about the sunspots and about the moons of Jupiter. And then later, Newton was like, huh, I wonder if I could explain that, right? If you like classical music, that's all in there. Beethoven and Mozart, maybe friends, maybe enemies, but they're preceded by Bach. Shakespeare maybe didn't write his plays. That's another fun one. The American Revolution and the French and Indian Wars, those are also spotted here. One thing I want to say though is that so this time period here, like as far back as we think of US history, starting in the US, that's how far back they thought of the colonization of the Americas. Like that's how ancient it was to people living in the US. So clearly they'd be like, we're not British. What are you talking about? Okay. Okay, this is the Common Era. So in a class like this, that's non-denominational, we use AD being the present day. And before 0, we call that the BCE, before Common Era. And you can see a lot of fun stuff. So that's the European colonization of the Americas. Of course, this isn't the only stuff that happened. I'm just centering it on this room, obviously. These are the lives of Da Vinci, Raphael, and Michelangelo. Da Vinci famously would sneak into graveyards and dig people up and then cut them up and see how they're made. Very illegal at the time, but very helpful for science. He also was the first person to draw how a helicopter would work, which is pretty rad. You didn't live to see it happen. But in order to not be, I don't know if he was paranoid, I don't exactly remember the history properly there, but he would write his notes in a mirror so they could only be read backwards, like left to right, but in the mirror and in a different language. That's pretty cool. So he didn't want to be copied. And then that's the Renaissance. Yeah, right. The Renaissance, some people like to highlight the Renaissance for a shift in the way of thinking, right? But let's remember that this is a culturally centered Renaissance of Europe. That is not to say that the whole world was suddenly enlightened. Because as we look through here, you have things like the Middle Ages, the High Middle Ages, and Late Middle Ages. There is a transfer of ideas. So while in the early Middle Ages, Europe was not really that good at scholarly activities, people in Mesopotamia, so those would be Arabian people and Indian peoples from India, were very good at math. And they were developing number systems that we would then go on to use, like the numbers you use today. They would develop the concept of 0 and of negative numbers, right? So all of that is necessary in this time period. And then because trading exists, they have silk and we want it, or we have like sheep and they want it, then you like pass ideas back and forth too, right? And so that leads to a cultural revolution in this period. Black Plague, yeah, that was bad. Rats, that's fucked some shit up. Michelangelo died in the same year that Galileo and Shakespeare was born. That's kind of cool. Like a fun tidbit. Hold on for later, like reincarnation. Birth of Islam's here, and the birth of Christianity, by definition, is at 0. Questions so far? Not what you thought you were getting yourself into. Okay. Whoa. All right. This is where it gets really fun because now we get to put a lot of shit in context. So one of my favorites is that Cleopatra, who's right there. So this is the Common Era, right? So Cleopatra lived just basically right before 0. And what that means is the ancient pyramids, which were built in about 2500 BC, would have been as ancient to her as she is to us. She is closer to the modern day than she was to the creation of the pyramids. I want you to think about that for a second. So she's walking around in Egypt and she's seeing ruins like we see them today. You're like, how the fuck did they build that? It's so accurate, right? No. Jail. Okay. So there's the Roman Empire. Pretty good. Long time. Almost 500 years. That's pretty impressive. I'm going to comment on the rest of them here. This one's really fun. This is a cool lineage. So Socrates, famous philosopher, his student is Plato, his student is Aristotle, and his student is Alexander the Great, who then goes on to create one of the most massive dynasties in like ages. That's a pretty cool line. If you just like think about what they were talking about at those times. Alexander the Great made a lot of places called Alexandria because that seemed like all the rage. He had his favorite horse, and I'm pretty sure he never took a formal wife. He had a friend, and he just thought that he would go and conquer the known world with his friend. And let's see what else is there. Ancient, so there's a number of dynasties. This could really be cut up in a lot of ways. So, for example, the very first like stepped pyramids is very different than the first pyramids. The stepped pyramids are the ones that you might see have similarities to like the Incas, who also made stepped pyramids. And the Great Pyramids of Giza is a completely different build because you have to smooth out these stones all the way down. Not easy, but if you have lots of time, yeah.
So if Jesus is on here, where would Muhammad or Siddhartha be?
Oh, Buddha's right there,
Okay.
right? And then if we go back, there you go.
Like, right, okay. Right.
Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of like those TikToks that you see where it's like fucks with your sense of time. How like Anne Frank and Martin Luther King were born on the same year.
Yeah. Yeah. It turns out history would be crazy like that, right? Okay, so we're going to go back and we're going to be heading towards the edge of history. So there are 2 different types of histories. There are oral traditions, and these are passed down by peoples who are not writing them down. They're stories. And then there are stories that you write down, and one of them carries more weight, right? So we are going to reflect on the things that I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not an anthropologist. I don't have the qualifications to weigh in on whether one is true or one is not. So I can only weigh in on the one that is written. That's my medium of understanding. But if that doesn't correspond to how your peoples know the ancient world, that's fine. I will defer to your knowledge, right? The oldest evidence of writing, we showed this, I believe, like the first or second class, like the Sumerian writing. And do you know what one of the oldest pieces of writing says? No. That would be funny, but that's not it. It's a complaint about not getting appropriate copper, like the copper quality was poor. So he's like, how dare you sold me these 60 copper or something? It was like shitty craftsmanship. And that's like one of the oldest pieces of writings that we have. And that's from 5,500 years ago. So if you think about what that means, right? It's not like 5,500 years ago, we were just like, oh, ambling around and didn't know what was going on. We had, full civilization. We were complaining about stuff, right? Not unlike today. Okay. So this is not quite as true statement. I'm not going to revise it though. Okay. So this is, I think, the more interesting part, is what we think of as behaviorally modern humans. Okay? So I hope that most people subscribe to the idea that the Earth is older than 6,000 years, because otherwise we have an issue explaining the slide. Basically, humans started to cultivate wheat, and this is a precursor in time for when we moved into more of an agriculture-focused society. Instead of using up all of the resources and moving to a new place and then killing everyone there and taking all the resources and going to a new place and killing everyone there and taking all the resources, we're like, oh, we'll just grow it, right? And it turns out that that is due to an abundance of a specific types of grains that are very protein heavy that you could actually sustain large farming populations on. And that's actually not found everywhere, okay? Just so happened that the cradle of modern civilization, which is Mesopotamia, there's like 6 or 7 of these types of grains that happen to have these properties, right? But not that that's a specifically interesting region, it just accommodated large groups of farmers. And in those times, 9,000 years ago, the climate was very different because it was very green and very lush. And then we started farming on it, and we didn't know what we were doing. And we acidified the land. And that made it into a desert. Okay, so if you're very interested in that, you have to sort of like change the way you think about the ancient Mesopotamian region. It didn't look at all what you think it looked like. It didn't look like Iraq. It didn't look like Iran. It looked much more lush everywhere. Now, of course, there's lots of places that are still lush. But you know, you think, how could the first civilization be born there? Because it didn't look like it. Right? Okay, so first evidence of climate change. Not climate change, but you know what I mean. Changing the climate. Okay, there was a little ice age. There's a petite one, a baby one. Froze everyone up good in the northern hemisphere. And this is subject to quite considerable debate. So as we're going from place to place, maybe we're doing it just to explore. Maybe we're like hunting stuff. Depending on who you talk to, they have different motivations. But this is basically, we have this like sort of larger range of what we think folks kind of came across from the other continent to this one, right? You'll notice some stuff here. Humans migrated out of Africa for the first time. When I say humans, I mean Homo sapiens. So that's about 60,000 years ago. And humans are considered to have complex language about 10,000 years after. When I say the word behaviorally modern humans, that means that they were communicating, maybe not exactly like this, but using not just gesticulations like my arms, like go eat that, or there's something over there, or stop, but using words, right? And we see language in other species, right? So we know that birds talk to each other. We just don't know what they're saying all the time, right? We know that whales have very developed languages, that we know that they have names for each other, and they even have fashion. They have like the salmon hat that came back in. You guys know that one? Okay. So for about 60,000 years, we were like us, just with no phones, right? That's it. Okay. And I don't think that's true. That's just in there for funnies. The oldest known cave paintings that have survived are from 40,000 years ago. It's unlikely that those are the oldest known cave. Thinking about what we know about human beings, right? If they can migrate, if they can get out of Africa and travel up to places that are much colder, they probably have tools. Tool utilization means that you're probably using things that are wood or rock, and some of it doesn't survive. It's made of material that degrades. The only reason that we know these cave paintings exist is because they happen to be in places that are protected. So if you didn't know to protect them, then you wouldn't know that they exist. One of the most famous examples of the old cave paintings is in a French cave with these horses. Has anyone ever seen these? I should have included them. Okay. So this picture, horse, and it's got like 8 legs. And people are always like, oh, it's such shitty art. Like, oh, don't you know what a horse looks like? It's like, yes, obviously they would know what a horse looks like. But what folks did was they brought candles into these caves. And they realized that the flickering of the candle can provide some interpretation of what you're seeing. So it's drawn in a way so that it wouldn't be used by a flashlight, and that flashlight would be used by a candle. That your brain would see motion, which is why they have extra legs, as the flickering candle catches different parts of the horse. Really cool. Yeah. And that's 40,000 years ago. Right? So this is us, right? Okay, let's go back. Yeah, the painted gifts. Yeah, exactly. We can't even do gifts on my phone. Or I can't. All right, never mind. No comment. All right, so here, oh, wrong way. There we go. All right. This is when we get back to anatomically modern humans. Okay, not behavioral. Okay. So the oldest Homo sapiens found, the fossil, remember this is a fossil, 195,000 years ago. They look like us. Do they think like us? We don't think so. Okay. They realize it's embarrassing not to be wearing clothes. They start wearing them. Is that true? No, it's just cold, probably. Right? Interestingly enough, this is like, to go 25,000 years before developing clothing. It's kind of wild. It means that you must live in exactly the right places, or you're just the right amount of hairy. But we're like not that hairy. Right? So we have to be living in exactly the right climate. And we're living on the ground at this point. Right? Not living in trees. So I don't know what's going on here. This is interesting. So some people argue that this happened almost 1 million years ago. This is also a point of contention, because if you have fire, then you don't need clothes. Fire is warm. I've heard. That was the last ice age period. There's a lot of words there. I think I'll leave this up for folks if they're curious to go through this afterwards. The thing that I really want to point out is where we are right now. Okay, so I can't hold my hand close enough. See that little red part? That's the same red part from earlier. And just to the right of it is that green part, which is like, 2000 BC or 2000 years. And you see that little pink part, right? That's recorded history. The one on the right, not the one that's there. Okay. Let's keep going. This took a while, sorry. Here's the human divergence from apes, probably around 6 million years ago. And we have to start using tools. We talked about this in the how to get off the earth lecture that we did last Tuesday. You need to start developing and utilizing tools. And so that begins this process of the Stone Age. There are some animals that are currently undergoing the Stone Age. Anyone know examples? Chimps are doing it, that's true. Yeah.
Don't otters use tools?
Otters use tools, that's correct. Ravens can use tools to open it. It's so cool.
Elephants?
Elephants, yeah, certainly know how to use them. Thinking of one more. Raccoons are in the process of self-domestication, which I love. That means every 30 years you have a little raccoon baby. Breeds of birds. But yeah, lots of breeds of birds. I was thinking about octopus. Octopus have a complex brain and they can use strings. Now, whether or not they're headed towards where we're headed is obviously not a given. We have to not think of evolution as something that takes us from point A to point B, but a meandering path that takes us in many directions, and only some of those are successful, right? Because climate changes, kills off different species. Other species kill off less successful species, believe it or not, right? Okay, so that is when we get the Homo genus, and of course we eradicate the other two friends of ours. One crazy thing to think about is there was a point on Earth where folks who looked pretty much identical to us, different species, different humanoid species, and there was 3 different species on Earth, all living together. Homo neanderthalis, Homo sapiens, and Homo erectus, walking around.
Did Australopithecus come before or after?
I think it's before. I'd have to double check. Don't quote me on that. Not a anthropologist. Okay. Mammals. So the first mammals occur about 200 million years ago. When was the dinosaurs killing everyone? What's that? 65. Yeah, that's about there. So you have a long time that mammals are basically little rats and voles and like scampering around doing really dumb stuff because it turns out that dinosaurs are bigger. They eat us good. And the first birds evolved. Quick question. Feathers, are they evolved for flight? Raise your hand. No. Did they evolve for the purpose of flight? Should never given any like trick questions for the whole semester. All right. Yeah, so they evolved for coloration, right? So if you look at something like a cardinal and you know it's Christmas time and you see the funny picture with two cardinals and they're both red, that's two boys kissing, right? Because one of them is a girl and one of them is a boy, and they have different coloration. And in fact, when we look at the ornithology of birds, the coloration is really important here. Because if you had more specialized colors, you were a better mate. You know, you have to do like your little dance too. They do these dances regardless of whether or not they're tropical birds, right? Swans have very choreographed, important mating dances, right? Ducks do as well. I'm not going to get into it. Ducks are dicks. But birds first evolve here. Birds are also not the first feather havers. Feathers are modified scales. And so we think dinosaurs were the first to have scales, right? Okay. This wipes out 75% of all species, and us little like burrowing mammals were like, and so we take over, and some of the mammals that had found their way into the water, like what is essentially a whale, they come back on the land and they become horses. So that's a weird thing to think about. And then cats evolved about 35 million years ago, and they're like, whatever. Okay, there's all animals. That's the reign of the dinosaurs. Tiny, but everyone for some reason loves it. I don't care. Pangea breaks up. And interestingly enough, it's this piece right here that's really important for the Pangea breakup, because this allows geologists to later come along and look at fossils on either side of the breakup. So for example, you look at a fossil in Brazil and you look at a fossil in Sierra Leone on the west coast of Africa, which they like fit together. It's the same species. And sometimes it's even the same species who walk, right? Like they're all walking together and they can't tell if it's the same individual, but it's the same group of animals walking together at the same time. Okay, that's the breakup of the Pangea. You have the first reptiles right before that. You have the first insects before that. You have the first land plants before that. And the first fish, of course, 500 million years ago. So when we talk about the idea that like sharks are older than trees, you're all familiar with that idea? Okay, that's why. Okay. What? Trees are like in here. Yeah. Like 3, 4, something like that. Just right around insects, I believe. So usually you start with like fern looking stuff. Like very like I don't know how to describe it. I'm not biology good, but you start with like fern-looking bros, and then later on you get grasses and stuff like that, and then grasses and trees.
Okay, this means the T-Rex is closer in time to seeing a Justin Bieber concert than seeing a live Stegosaurus.
There's little notes in there for you to go back to.
That's crazy.
Okay. Okay. So we need to keep going because we have a lot to go. So here's the first animal 600 million years ago. And remember, we talked about the first multicellular life. That's one of those steps in colonizing the universe, right? And that's about 1 billion years ago. But that's not when the first cells evolved. So those first simple cells we can trace back to 3.6 billion years ago. And for 2.6 billion years, those single cells basically did fuck all, right? So that's the last common ancestor for all objects, about 3.5 billion years ago. And the Great Oxygenation Event, which converts CO2 atmosphere into oxygen, happens about 100 million years afterwards. Okay, and then those like oxygen producers, because you have to remember they're taking carbon dioxide and turning them into oxygen, they evolve into the eukaryotes. And we don't know what the hell's going on here. Right, that's a great folder candidate for sure. It's just like happened. I don't know. Maybe it happens frequently, maybe it doesn't happen frequently. Okay, almost there. So this is the Earth. So that's life, all of life here. And it's like right after the Earth is born. Right? I mean, relatively speaking. So sun is born right there. That's the yellow going through this whole thing. There's this period here called the Hadean. They call it Hadean because the solar system looks like the underworld, because everything is on lava and everything's getting smashed into. It's very hot, very uncomfortable. And then it ends. And that's like when the moon theoretically formed, and afterwards it was hit a bunch. That's why the moon looks so cratered. If they were flipped, you would have no record of the late heavy bombardment, right? So the fact that you see all of this cratering after it was formed is really important. And then spontaneously life appears. Okay. Okay, so now let's build the rest of the universe. Okay. So you'll notice really good drawings here, right? Big Bang. And it turns out that the Milky Way was like, yep, I'll form right away. The Milky Way is old, but we're like relatively new. So if this is a baseball game, we're in like the 7th inning, right? Whereas like the Milky Way just starts out like right away. About 12 billion years old, right? We're not going to talk about what happens before. I mean, we will later, but just speculatively. Any questions about this before we go in that direction? Okay, so what happens next? Not like after the spot. Okay. We're not gonna make it. Okay, Earth is fucked. In about 8 billion years, we are just bad to the bone. But that's okay. I don't think any of us is gonna live in 8 billion. I hope not. So, okay. So this is a lot of things that are gonna happen. This first one, we're gonna think through that in a lot of detail. It's questionable because CO2 levels can drop, but they can be regenerated by outgassing from the interior. Does that cycle turn off? Is it a constant one? We look at Venus, we see it has plenty of CO2, right? So we don't know necessarily if this is right, but it doesn't matter because in a billion years, the sun is going to get so hot that it'll boil all the water anyway. Okay, but that's okay because in 2.8 billion years, the temperature will be 300 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, so we'll all be good. But that's okay because by 3.5 billion years, the atmosphere will be Venus's. That's like 800 degrees Fahrenheit. But that's okay because Andromeda is going to hit us. But that's okay. But that's okay because the sun is going to expand to 250 times the size of its current size, and it's going to envelop the Earth. So that's good. So get everything that you want to get done in the next 100 years. Okay, you got plenty. 100 years, you got plenty of time. You'd be surprised, yeah.
Sun burning up fuel, why get maybe
That's the right way to ask it, first of all. If sun running out of stuff, why big? And the issue there is it will move into something called the red giant stage, and it will start to burn differently. So as it builds up more helium in its interior, it won't be able to burn helium. And so it'll resort to doing something else, basically at the boundary of where helium and hydrogen meet. And that's gonna puff up the exterior. It's gonna have a hot like fire cooking at the bottom. And that's gonna like heat up the piece above it and it's gonna make it real puffy. But that puffy is like not like comfortable, it's like flame. Exactly, yeah. And so when we look tonight at Orion, and you look to the red one named Betelgeuse, that is a red supergiant who is undergoing a very similar process to what our Earth will do, our sun will do later on. You okay?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. Oh, good. All right, let's keep going. All right. So after that, the whole universe is fun. Now I need to show you that there are big time jumps here. Okay, so we are talking incalculable amounts of time, things that really just don't make sense to us because we're talking about 1 trillion years. What does 1 trillion years feel like to us? Nothing. Yeah, it feels like 1 trillion years, right? And so star formation will end. Why is that? Why would star formation end?
Everything gets too far out for space.
And
It's too cold.
so remember, we have galactic recycling. We're turning hydrogen into helium, hydrogen into helium. That's an irreversible process. You can't make more hydrogen. You can't, once you've run out of helium, you can't make more helium. Well, you can, but it's through fusion. They won't be doing this. Anyway, so this is a process that's non-renewable. You never would have think about stars as a non-renewable resource, but it is when you think about it in the context of trillions of years, right? Okay, so that's when all stars exhaust all of their fuel. That's 120 trillion years from now. So at that point, everything is still hot, but nothing is undergoing fusion anymore. So you mostly only have black holes in 10 to the, that's a lot, it's a big number. So what that means is that everything that is matter now lives inside of black holes. But black holes actually evaporate for a reason that we can't get into in this class. And by the end of it, the universe is expanded so much. There's no star formation anywhere. Everything is far away and cooling down, so much so that the universe finally cools back down to 0. And that's the heat death of the universe. Yeah.
How accurate is this? I mean, you said like timelines, you know, it's way farther than like 10 million years or maybe more.
Yeah.
How do we know, like, you think it's like accurate or is it just like estimating?
This is accurate. This is more accurate than knowing when humans found clothes. So the reason is because these rules are simple. They're not simple. These rules are straightforward to understand. What I mean by that is the way that we understand gravity can be written down on a chalkboard, right? It's not complicated by the fact that stuff can decay or like, I don't quite know what the equation is, right? We know what the equation is. So all we have to do is understand the universe in its current form and project it forward. And lots of competing theorists have done this, all trying to disprove the other, and they agree. Yeah.
So with galactic recycling, like what is it, hydrogen and helium is like the most rudimentary of the elements. Would it just be working with the elements from the last universe? And then like would there be more terrestrial planets in the next universe?
Yeah, okay, so we have to be a little careful about the words here.
Yeah.
So every time we cycle, right now we're on what's called the population 3 stars. And what this means is that we've had 2 galactic recyclings. So if we have another one, like you're saying, we'll have more terrestrial planets. But we're still limited to 1 universe. And we don't know any way of taking this material and putting it into another universe where it can be reused. It's all used still locally. It's just that the individual galaxies are getting farther away.
So it's still like the same percentage composition of what's working with.
Well, the total amount is the same, but like you said, so like more of the hydrogen and helium move towards like metals.
Yeah.
And so you get more terrestrial planets the next time. And then even more the next time. And right, as as you get towards like maybe 500 billion years, you're not making gas giants anymore. So you just don't have gas, right? Okay. I don't know if we're gonna get through to the rockets. I'm sorry. We'll do a couple small rocket things. Okay, so all right, this is the whole thing. This is why we don't talk about what happened before the Big Bang, right? What's the first rule of astro class? We don't talk about before the Big Bang. Okay, so we just don't know. It's not scientific to talk about. There are no measurements to be made about it. If someone tells you they know, they are lying. Okay, they're probably selling you something. Okay, so what this means is we have to have certain things that we can and cannot know about. So I often like to ask or like respond to questions about, well, why is this that way? And I can't always answer why. Sometimes I can only answer how, right? I know how something drops, but I might not know why it drops, right? So yeah, that's confusing, that's depressing, and that's us. Cool.
So before the universe was came in.
I don't know. I can't say no. I also can't say yes,
I
right?
mean, the only thing I've heard about is that it was apparently like a huge notion of antimatter and matter. That was
Well, we don't know. We can't know. Understanding how time works means that you can't describe something before the universe because there is no way to test it. Now, interestingly enough, if you were taking the Astro 1010 class where they talk about cosmology, there is something called the cosmic microwave background, which is the last blueprint of what the smallest part of the universe looked like when it was very close together. And it's sort of like present at all times. We can see it, the light from the last part of the universe when it was a young age. And the places where it's bright, like where it's clumped together, is where galaxies later on clump together. So there's little variations in sort of the surface of the early universe that led to where galaxies formed. Sorry, that was confusing. Okay, let's go. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, everyone happy? Is that what you wanted from the timeline of all time? Any other questions before we do rockets? It's like cleanse our palates.
one more rockets, that's
So this is the coolest rocket. What's this one? What? No, very close.
Saturn V.
The Saturn V, yeah. Okay, so why do you know it's a Saturn V? The way it looks like a Saturn V does. Yeah, so that's where they walk in, and they get into the command module, and they walk on top of 191 feet of fuel to get launched to the moon. Okay, so we certainly don't have enough time. This could be a class in and of itself. I recommend this. This is really fun. If you know what a DVD is, you can buy them. I think you can find them online. Okay, I won't go through the whole thing. I guess you guys don't want to know about the history of propulsion. Maybe a little bit, just one propulsion history. Okay, first rockets. So first rockets were weapons. Obviously, everything started as a weapon if you wanted to get money for it. So you had like the fire arrow and the dragon arrow shaped. Oh, sorry, these are my notes on it. They didn't say that on there. And they were mostly incendiary. So like, if someone's holed up in their castle, you're like, haha, not anymore. And you shoot fire over their walls at them so they come out. You can kill them. The Congreve rocket you may be familiar with. So the rocket's red glare is the Congreve rocket from 1804. National anthem, not the same in 1776, not created until later during the Spanish-American War. Or no, during which one was this? The War of 1812? I don't know, something like that. Doesn't matter. Okay. One fun thing to remember is Operation Paperclip. If you need a conspiracy theory, by the time you leave this class, go ahead and look up Operation Paperclip. We just like grabbed all the scientists from Germany during that one war, and we said, hey, come on over and work for us. You build rockets, right? Go ahead and think about that for a long time. And then we did this. This is the first picture of the Earth from outside of the Earth. This is launched from a place called White Sands, New Mexico. You can go there, it's pretty cool. My dogs are from there. And they learned how to launch rockets really high and take pictures. With, of course, the express goal of launching rockets really high so that on the way down they could deliver a bomb. Thankfully, we're going to talk about the cool things that does instead of the awful things that does. Okay. So you may be familiar with this. Yeah, this is sad too. Sorry, guys. So this one here, we're embroiled in conflict with our Russian adversaries in the Cold War. And part of the Cold War is a technology demonstration. We have better technology because of our superior mode of government, right? So we're going to demonstrate that by spending shit tons of money on something that seems superfluous. By going to space, dominating space. You can tell people in charge of that. Okay? So the USSR sent the first satellite into space, and it survived. Have you ever heard it? Come on now. That's all it did. Didn't send back data. It just said, hey, I'm still alive. And I assume it's somewhere. I don't know. I don't know how high they put it. NASA was founded afterwards. After they succeeded, they're like, oh, you guys get a NASA. And then they launched a dog very rudely with the goal of putting humans into space. Now you might be saying to yourself, why would you do that? That's so rude. Look at how cute she is. What?
They picked her up from the street, she was a stray dog.
But she's a cutie. She's so nice. Okay. So what were they looking for? What did they want to understand? What? Yeah, yeah. Well, why wouldn't we just assume that? Radiation, pressure. So we're gonna put them in a suit. They're gonna be safe. So we live on Earth and everything is like pulled down. So they weren't sure, for example, whether or not the blood would still move good. Right? They didn't know whether you need gravity to help circulation, right? Or if you just like die. It's mostly biology. How do you pressurize the capsule? Can you survive multiple Gs? That is like accelerating off of the planet. Will you die from tiny little pieces of dust just smashing into you and putting holes in your spacesuit? And can you get them back to Earth safe? All of these were unknown. So we had to do a lot of things. We had to test many of them. Okay, we're going to skip past Ham. You know Ham? It's okay. All right, so we're going to do this one instead because this is amazing. If you've never seen this before. Same guy who got murdered.
Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
So that's the famous one. One thing that's cool about this, I want to point out the quality of TV. Okay, So this is a recording, right? This is not how it looked. They had better cameras. The quality has degraded because it's filmed on film, and film is made of cellulose, and that degrades, okay? So you may think in your mind, people who had TVs, like, how could you ever fucking watch that? The quality is so shitty. No, it was better. We just can't see it good, right? And so when we talk about the next part, which will be the moon landings, this was nationally broadcast to every person in the US and every person around the world. They got to watch it live, but it's going to look like crap to you. Okay? I promise you. So we can take pictures like this, you know, still frames, and they're better preserved negatives than these rolls of film, right? Project Gemini, we had the first people who like left the space thing, got outside, like, oh, look at how far away I am. And then we get back inside, right? Close them back in. This is the first picture of all humans except for the humans in the capsule. So that is us in Earthrise. Which part of the world is it? I think that's Australia, but I don't remember. So the Apollo program is when we start to take the lead. We're really running away with this game. And we're getting real good at putting people into space. And the first time we try to do this with Apollo 1, it's a disaster and people get really hurt. Then we do it a bunch of really successful times. And Apollo 10, I believe, is when they say, okay, you're going to go towards the moon. You're going to go around it and back towards us. But we're not going to give you enough fuel because if you try to land, we think you might. But we'll give you not enough fuel, so if you land on the moon, you're stuck on the moon. Okay, that was the only way that they could get these test pilots to behave, essentially. So that, you know, because everything has to happen in order, right? They have to prove that they can get around the moon and come back. And they were worried that they would try to get around the moon, land on the moon, and then come back. And just like, so Apollo 11 is the first time they give enough fuel and they get to the moon and they land on the moon. And one of the things you really want to remember here is no computers in the way that you think about them. Okay? There are people who are computers. There's a room full of women, particularly women of color, who are sitting there doing the calculations by hand to get them to the moon. Okay? They're like, all right, hold on, my computer will check this. And they call someone, what do you think? Yeah, looks right. Okay, and then they change the trajectory a little bit. And, yeah, finish it. Okay, so there's people, while they're landing, they're not calling back. Okay? Because that is like a delay, I think, of a few seconds, like 20 or 30 seconds. And so you're landing in real time. So you're inside the capsule and you got a joystick, right? You don't have like, I don't know, there's no like auto land, right? So he's gonna land it by hand. So as we watch the video of them landing, this is what I want you to think about. They are firing and they're just like, all right, we're getting close, a lot of dust. And they're trying to look for a very like smooth place to land. They don't accidentally like land on their side and can't fly off. And famously, Lyndon B. Johnson has two versions of the congratulations speech after they landed prepared. You should read the one in case they failed. It's really, really fantastic. But they didn't. Okay.
Is it fantastic or boring?
No, it's really thinking about how like the gravity of the situation, what it means to do something unique for the first time, right? It is fantastic. It's sad, but it's fantastic. Oh, I guess I didn't delete this in the wrong order. Okay, well now I'm giving it away, but he lands on the moon. You knew that. All right, hold on.
I'm gonna step off the limb now. One giant leap for mankind.
Okay. So let's watch the video, right? No one believes that. That's awful.
2, 1. and to the right a little. Right. On a half. Contact right. Okay. We're burning flat. Looks good, flat. Nice shot, flat. Roger.
Okay, so that was pretty fun, right? Okay, so hold on. Let me show you just one more thing. I want to delete this to show you the picture, but whatever. Two more things I'll say about that. You know, this process of going to the moon. Everyone was watching. You have a parent that is like in their 60s or a grandparent that's in their 60s, they probably watch like live. The technology to fake the moon landing was not as advanced as going to the moon. We went to the moon for 10 years, and then the American public was like, I'm bored. And so we just didn't fly 3 whole other rockets that we built. And I want to show you how big these rockets are before I let you go. Okay. So here's the progression of rocket sizes. Okay. So on the left-hand side, that is a school bus. That's not a rocket. Okay. And that's a person. And so the first ones, the ones that delivered bombs like the V-2 bomber, that's here. And over here, you have some big Russian ones, right? You have the red stone is the one that I showed you the picture that took the first image from White Sands, right? That's the red stone rocket. And if we scale them here, this is still the appropriate scale. This is an Atlas II and the Ariane 1, kind of in use relatively recently. The Long March 4C is used by the Chinese. If you look over here, this is the Space Launch System, or sorry, the shuttle. STS. Never mind. This is stick. Okay, this is the first reusable launch vehicle, and it was a plane. Just like glide it back down. Awesome. This had a hangar, and the hangar would open, and then they would just like pull out the telescope and just like drop it. And of course, for every one mission that is unclassified that the space shuttle flew, there's like 4 that are classified. And if you have something that can fly up, open its doors, and grab a satellite, kind of cool. You can get rid of spy capabilities pretty quickly. You can fly around, grab satellites, put away, fly back down. No, I didn't do anything. Okay, so down here is the person, small, right? Okay. We're getting there. The mission I work for, no, not these ones. We got to get to Atlas 5 in order to get to my mission. Come on, what's ESA? European Space Agency.
I will know like this thing, how you can know which rockets are so big.
Yeah. Okay, and so this is still the same person. There's the Atlas V. Okay, so the Maven spacecraft, which I did my graduate research on, and I got to watch it launch from Cape Canaveral. is in here in the fairing, and then we were very far away. If you're too close to a rocket when it goes off, the sound wave too. So don't do that. Yeah.
What's
Oh, yeah.
that doing? It's gonna be-
Don't be close. And there's the Saturn V. So that is a person there, and you can go to Houston, you can go to Cape Canaveral, and they have them. They just didn't use them, they just pumped the fuel back out and just laid them down. And you can go walk next to them. Good. And they just hang out right there. Okay. Let's see, what else? I could show you more stuff, but I could also just say that it's been a pleasure. I hope you have learned at least one fun thing that you can bring home to your family and friends. And if you didn't learn anything fun, don't write that on my Rate My Professor. Okay, if you haven't dropped off your clickers, please do that here. You can click in for the last time here. And I'm gonna run to a plane. Thank you. Thanks.
Final homework is due next week, correct?
Yes, yeah. Next Friday.
And